The TV's blue glow cut through my mother-in-law's perfect living room as her voice on screen said, "Put it in my son's wife's name." Still, I set my glass down and felt my wedding ring cool against my finger, refusing to look at Ryan beside me. As the speakers hissed and the glow widened, it painted our marriage in the same cold light it gave her lie. While that blue glare held all three of us frozen, I understood how love had been used to make control look normal. The same glow caught Ryan's jaw tighten before he defended her, and I realized I'd never been a partner. I was protection. That's when I made my decision. I wouldn't break the family apart. I'd stand still and let the truth do it for me. Before we start, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. If you enjoy the story, please hit like, subscribe, and join our community. It really helps us grow. Elaine's front door opened before I could finish smoothing my dress, like she'd been waiting to catch us mid-adjustment. "There you are," she said, and she kissed my cheek with the kind of precision you used for photos. Her perfume hit me. White flowers and powder, sweet enough to feel aggressive. Then, before I could even say hello properly, she turned away mid-sentence, already reaching for Ryan's arm like he was the only person who mattered. I stood there for half a beat, champagne bottle in my hands, smiling too hard so no one could accuse me of Helene's front door opened before I could finish smoothing my dress, like she'd been waiting to catch us mid-adjustment. "There you are," she said, and she kissed my cheek with the kind of precision you used for photos. Her perfume hit me, white flowers and powder, sweet enough to feel aggressive. Then, before I could even say hello properly, she turned away mid-sentence, already reaching for Ryan's arm like he was the only person who mattered. I stood there for half a beat, champagne bottle in my hands, smiling too hard so no one could accuse me of having an attitude. Ryan gave my back a gentle push, a shepherding touch. "Babe, come on," he murmured, all warmth for the room. Elaine's house looked like a show home, everything spotless, everything placed on purpose. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and roasted meat. Even the lighting felt curated, soft and flattering, like it existed to make her look good. At the dinner table, Elaine lifted her glass and clinked it with her fork. The sound rang sharp, and conversations dimmed on cue. "I just want to say how proud I am of my son," she announced, eyes shining as she looked at Ryan. "Ryan carries this household. He works hard. He provides. He keeps everything together." Carries. Like I was something heavy he had to haul. Brooke laughed, loud and easy, and added, "Some people just aren't built for responsibility." Her eyes flicked to me like a quick slap. Forks scraped plates in an awkward rhythm, metal on ceramic, too loud in the little silence that followed. I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my face calm. I'd learned that reacting was how you proved you were unstable. Under the table, Ryan squeezed my knee. Not comfort, pressure. He didn't even look at me when he said, still smiling at everyone, "She gets overwhelmed easily. Don't mind her." My stomach dropped. Overwhelmed. Like I was a problem with a diagnosis. Elaine tilted her head with fake sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, sweet as syrup. "We all have our limitations." A few minutes later, she stood and stacked serving plates, then shoved the pile into my hands as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The porcelain was warm and heavy, clinking softly as I tried to balance it. "Be useful, sweetheart," she said, that same sugary voice that never sounded kind. I carried the plates into the bright kitchen, the overhead lights harsher, the tile cold under my feet. When I came back, they were laughing again. Ryan, Brooke, Elaine, like the room had exhaled now that I'd been put where I belonged. I tried to swallow my pride with a sip of water, but the memory of my card declining earlier that day wouldn't leave me. The beep of the register, the polite pause, the embarrassment. So I asked, quietly at first, "Ryan, why does my debit card keep declining?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, voice suddenly loud, loud enough to make it a public lesson. "Because you don't track spending," he said, smiling like he was joking. "You just swipe and hope." Elaine's eyes glittered, pleased. Brooke's mouth curled like she'd been waiting for it. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I forced a small nod, like I accepted the blame, like I was grateful to be corrected. Later, in the dark at home, the bedroom smelled like detergent, and Ryan's cologne soaked into the sheets. I lay still, staring at the faint stripes of streetlight on the wall, listening to his breathing slow. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand, one sharp vibration that felt like a warning. A bank alert lit the screen in cold blue. It wasn't my usual bank, and Ryan rolled over too fast, too awake, like he'd been waiting to see if I saw it, aving an attitude. Ryan gave my back a gentle push, a shepherding touch. "Babe, come on," he murmured, all warmth for the room. Elaine's house looked like a show home. Everything spotless, everything placed on purpose. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and roasted meat. Even the lighting felt curated, soft and flattering, like it existed to make her look good. At the dinner table, Elaine lifted her glass and clinked it with her fork. The sound rang sharp and conversations dimmed on cue. "I just want to say how proud I am of my son," she announced, eyes shining as she looked at Ryan. "Ryan carries this household. He works hard, he provides, he keeps everything together." Carries. Like I was something heavy he had to haul. Brooke laughed, loud and easy, and added, "Some people just aren't built for responsibility." Her eyes flicked to me like a quick slap. Forks scraped plates in an awkward rhythm, metal on ceramic, too loud in the little silence that followed. I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my face calm. I'd learned that reacting was how you proved you were unstable. Under the table, Ryan squeezed my knee. Not comfort, pressure. He didn't even look at me when he said, still smiling at everyone, "She gets overwhelmed easily, don't mind her." My stomach dropped. Overwhelmed. Like I was a problem with a diagnosis. Elaine tilted her head with fake sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, sweet as syrup. "We all have our limitations." A few minutes later, she stood and stacked serving plates, then shoved the pile into my hands as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The porcelain was warm and heavy, clinking softly as I tried to balance it. "Be useful, sweetheart," she said, that same sugary voice that never sounded kind. I carried the plates into the bright kitchen, the overhead lights harsher, the tile cold under my feet. When I came back, they were laughing again. Ryan, Brooke, Elaine, like the room had exhaled now that I'd been put where I belonged. I tried to swallow my pride with a sip of water, but the memory of my card declining earlier that day wouldn't leave me. The beep of the register, the polite pause, the embarrassment. So I asked, quietly at first, "Ryan, why does my debit card keep declining?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, voice suddenly loud enough to make it a public lesson. "Because you don't track spending," he said, smiling like he was joking. "You just swipe and hope." Elaine's eyes glittered, pleased. Brooke's mouth curled like she'd been waiting for it. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I forced a small nod like I accepted the blame, like I was grateful to be corrected. Later, in the dark at home, the bedroom smelled like detergent, and Ryan's cologne soaked into the sheets. I lay still, staring at the faint stripes of streetlight on the wall, listening to his breathing slow. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. One sharp vibration that felt like a warning. A bank alert lit the screen in cold blue. It wasn't my usual bank, and Ryan rolled over too fast, too awake, like he'd been waiting to see if I saw it. The first decline happened so fast I thought the machine glitched. I stood at the grocery store checkout with a cart of ordinary things: chicken, pasta, oranges, dish soap, Ryan's coffee creamer. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the conveyor belt hummed as the cashier scanned items with quick little beeps. Her smile was polite, automatic. "All right, total is $126.43, she said. "Whenever you're ready." I slid my debit card in. The reader chirped, then flashed red, declined. My face warmed. "Sorry," I said too quickly. "Can I try again? It must be—" "Sure," she replied, still pleasant. Behind me, someone shifted their cart. A shoe squeaked on the tile. I tried again. The same cheerful beep, The same red word, declined. My throat tightened. I laughed a little like it was funny. That's weird. The cashier's smile thinned, her eyes flicking to the growing line. I tried a third time because panic makes you stubborn, and because I didn't want this to be real. Declined. Her expression turned neutral. Do you have another form of payment? A woman behind me sighed, not even trying to hide it. My ears rang. I opened my purse and pretended to search, fingers shaking as they brushed receipts and a lipstick I hadn't worn in weeks. I ended up paying cash for a few essentials and watching the cashier slide the rest of my groceries into a bin like they were someone else's life. I can hold these for a few minutes, she said softly. Thank you, I whispered, and pushed my half-empty cart away, cheeks burning all the way to my car. Outside, the air smelled like exhaust and cold metal. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Then I called Ryan. He answered on the third ring. Yeah? My card declined, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. 3 times. What's going on? He sighed, long and irritated, like I'd asked why the sky was blue. I moved funds, he said. Stop making scenes. A scene? Ryan, I'm at the grocery store. Exactly, he snapped, then smoothed his voice into that reasonable tone that always made me sound crazy by comparison. I'll transfer it later. Just go home. Why didn't you tell me? Because you overreact, he said, like it was a fact. I'm handling it. The call ended, and I sat there staring at families loading bags into trunks, normal people with normal access to their own money. My stomach felt hollow. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Elaine. Ryan says you're stressed again. Come by tomorrow. We'll talk. Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? A summons, like she was my manager and I'd messed up my shift. The next day, her house smelled like lemon cleaner and expensive soap. She offered tea and guided me into her spotless kitchen, all bright counters and quiet judgment. Without sitting, she slid a folder across the counter. Budget rules, she said with a smile. Adults follow plans. I stared at the neatly printed pages, the little categories and limits, my chest tightening. I don't need rules, I said carefully. I want access to our accounts. Elaine tilted her head, voice soft. Do you want to humiliate my son? After all he does? The front door opened. Ryan walked in, kissed her cheek, then looked at me like I was the problem he'd come to manage. See? He said, smiling. I told you she'd help. Why do you always resist help? I set the teacup down before my hands betrayed me. I should go. As I turned, something in the trash caught my eye. An envelope corner, torn open. My name printed on it in clean black letters. My stomach dropped because it wasn't junk mail. It was almost midnight when I tried to prove to myself I wasn't imagining things. The house was quiet. The refrigerator hum, the faint tick of the hallway vent, Ryan slow breathing beside me. Streetlight stripes cut through the blinds and laid across the comforter like pale bars. I slid my phone out carefully, the screen lighting my hands in cold blue, and opened our joint banking app. Joint, I told myself. Ours. I typed the password I'd used for years and hit login. Incorrect password. My stomach tightened. I tried again, slower, thumbs trembling. Incorrect password. The glow made the bedroom feel colder. I tried a third time because my brain refused to accept something so simple could be taken from me. Incorrect password. Ryan shifted, not sleepy, alert. What are you doing? He muttered. I'm trying to log in, I whispered. It says the password is wrong. He didn't sit up, didn't act surprised. He just sighed like I'd interrupted something important. I updated it. Why? My voice came out small. Because you get anxious, he said flatly. I'm protecting you from spiraling. Protecting. The word sounded gentle until it landed like a lock clicking shut. I swallowed. It's my account too, Ryan. He gave a little scoff and rolled away. Go to sleep, he said, like the conversation and my access was over. The next morning, Elaine called while I stood at the kitchen counter with coffee I forgot to drink. Sunlight warmed the tile, pretending everything was normal. Her voice was sweet with impatience. "Stop fixating on money," she said. "Focus on being pleasant. My birthday is coming." "I can't access the account," I said carefully. "Ryan changed the password." Elaine laughed, airy and dismissive. "He's trying to keep things stable. You have a tendency to worry." Then softer, "Be supportive. Ryan has enough pressure." At lunch, Brooke chose a booth by the window. The restaurant smelled like grilled bread and iced tea, silverware clinking all around us. She leaned in like she was sharing a secret, then said it loud enough for the next table to hear. "She thinks Ryan hides money," she laughed, "like she has money to hide." Heat rushed up my neck. "That's not—" "Relax," she cut in, smiling. "It's a joke. God, you're so sensitive." I went home and opened the filing cabinet. The inside looked wrong, too neat. Blank dividers, empty sleeves, missing statements. On top of a folder, a yellow sticky note in Ryan's handwriting read, "Don't touch." When Ryan came in, I asked, "Where are the statements?" He stared a beat too long, then said calmly, "You're imagining problems again." That night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A photo of a loan document, my name on it. One line beneath, "Ask your husband about the signature." Elaine's family brunch was anything but. The second I stepped inside her immaculate house, it felt like I was walking into a courtroom, not a home. Sunlight poured through spotless windows, casting a harsh glow on every perfectly arranged detail. Vases, trays, the dining table where we were all expected to sit. I felt exposed in that light, like everyone was waiting for me to mess up. Elaine cut fruit with slow, deliberate precision. The knife tapped against the cutting board, each slice punctuating the silence. It felt like she was measuring every word, every glance, to make sure I knew my place. "Trust in marriage," she began, her voice soft and sweet, like she was about to share a pearl of wisdom. "Some women sabotage their own homes with suspicion." My chest tightened. I knew where this was going. She looked directly at me, eyes narrowing slightly. "Some women create problems where there aren't any, and then they wonder why things fall apart." I swallowed. "I'm not trying to create problems," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Ryan piped up from beside me, his tone casual, but his words hit harder than he intended. "She's been emotional lately. You know how she gets." My face flushed. Emotional. He was always so quick to dismiss my concerns. Tom didn't speak. He just stared at his plate, his silence an agreement to whatever Elaine and Ryan decided. Elaine's smile was razor sharp. "Ryan has a lot of pressure, and he's doing his best." She paused, waiting for my response. But I had nothing to say. It was always the same. I was the problem. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. "Is there a loan in my name?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my effort to sound calm. "Because I found something in the mail." Elaine laughed, a short, cutting sound. "If there is, it's because you weren't paying attention." My hands trembled. "What does that mean?" She shrugged, her smile sweet but cold. "Adults take responsibility for their finances." Brooke leaned in, her perfume heavy in the air. "Maybe you should be grateful anyone married you," she whispered loud enough for the whole table to hear. The words hit me like a slap. I stood up quickly, my chair scraping the floor. I couldn't breathe in that room any longer. Outside, the air was fresh, but it didn't ease the tightness in my chest. I sat in my car, opened my credit report, and saw it. The accounts. One labeled Home Equity Line under my name. The lobby of the bank smelled sterile, citrus cleaner mixing with the faint scent of printer toner. I stood there, trying to make myself as invisible as possible, feeling small in the gray, fluorescent-lit space. The hard tile beneath my shoes made every step sound too loud, too exposed. The clerk behind the counter was polite, as always, but something in her eyes told me she knew this wasn't a simple transaction. "Ma'am," she said, her voice soft but formal, Your HELOC payment is past due." The words hit me like a slap. My heart raced, the room shrinking around me. My mouth went dry. I don't understand," I said, trying to sound like I had control. "I haven't missed any payments." She glanced at the computer screen, then back at me, her smile a little too tight. "The system shows a past due balance. Would you like to speak with a manager?" I nodded, even though I felt like I might crumble. A few moments later, a manager came over, a man in his 40s, wearing a gray suit that looked a little too big on him. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, if you'd like to step into my office, we can go over the details," he said, his voice low and careful. I followed him, my steps shaky, heart pounding. The office was quiet, the air conditioning humming softly, too clean, too cold. He sat behind the desk, still glancing at my wedding ring as if it somehow explained everything. Like the fact that I was married made it okay for me to be here, asking about my own money. It felt wrong, all of it. "I'll just pull up the file," he said, tapping away at the keyboard. A few seconds later, he slid a folder across the desk. "Here you go, the HELOC paperwork." My hand hovered over it, but I couldn't bring myself to open it at first. I took a deep breath, then slowly lifted the folder, flipping it open. Everything inside looked normal at first: forms, signatures, the usual jargon. But then my eyes landed on the authorization page. The signature at the bottom wasn't just familiar, it was too perfect, too clean. I blinked, my breath catching in my throat. The signature looked like mine, but it was too smooth, too exact. I'd never signed anything like this before. My stomach dropped. The manager must have noticed my hesitation. "That's your signature, correct?" he asked, voice careful. I pointed at the notary line, my finger trembling slightly. "I didn't sign this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is not my signature. And where is the notary?" He leaned forward, adjusting his glasses, his fingers brushing over the paper before pointing at the notary section. "The notary office is listed as Elaine's Community Foundation." Elaine's name felt like a punch in the gut. My mind raced, trying to piece together the reality of what I was seeing. Elaine, Ryan's mother, had been involved in this. The notary ID tied directly to her foundation's operations. I stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor behind me, the sound too sharp. The room felt suddenly too small, suffocating. I didn't say anything else to the manager. I grabbed the papers, stuffed them in my purse, and walked out, the door's soft chime sounding more like a warning bell. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I dialed Ryan as soon as I reached my car, my fingers slipping on the phone screen. The air outside smelled faintly of rain, the kind of fresh scent that should have calmed me but didn't. I could barely breathe. "Ryan," I said, my voice tight, "you need to explain something to me. There's a loan in my name, and Elaine's foundation is involved. Why didn't you tell me?" There was a long pause. Then his voice came, low and defensive. "Why are you at the bank?" The question hit me like a slap. No, "Are you okay?" No concern, just annoyance. Like my fear, my worry, was an inconvenience. I hung up without another word, feeling a sharp ache in my chest. In the parking lot, I opened an email the bank had forwarded me, trying to make sense of everything. I scrolled through it and my stomach dropped again. The contact number on the loan wasn't mine. It was Elaine's foundation's number. As I sat there, trying to steady my breathing, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from an unknown number. "You're the fall person. Check the foundation's books." My hand froze over the phone. The words burned into my mind, everything in me recoiling. Elaine had planned this. Ryan had helped her, and I was left holding the pieces. The waiting room was silent save for the hum of the air conditioning. Miss Chen's office smelled like coffee and paper, clean, serious, far from the chaos at home. It felt like a sanctuary. She opened the door and motioned for me to sit across from her desk. Her gaze was calm, collected, confident. No small talk. She was here to work. "I'm listening," she said, her voice firm but kind. I told her everything. about the loan I hadn't signed, Ryan's evasiveness, Elaine's calculated control. I was careful with my words, trying not to sound emotional, though it was hard. She didn't flinch. She just listened, taking notes. When I finished, she pulled out a notepad. "Dates, names, documents," she said, her pen poised. "We start here." And that's when I realized how much I'd been trained to apologize, how much I'd second-guessed myself, justified their actions. I hadn't realized how much they'd turned my doubt into a weapon. I had no intention of begging for their approval anymore. My phone buzzed. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then pressed speakerphone. His voice came through, casual as always. "Where are you? Everything okay?" I tried to sound neutral. "I'm with Ms. Chen, going over everything." "Look," he said, tone shifting to his reasonable husband voice. "She's confused. She's stressed. This isn't the time to make accusations." Ms. Chen interrupted, calm but firm. "Why is your mother's foundation linked to a loan in your wife's name?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long it felt suffocating. Ryan's response, when it came, was defensive, low. "That's not—" He stopped himself. "You don't understand." Ms. Chen's voice didn't waver. "I understand enough to know this doesn't add up. Why is your mother's foundation involved in this?" The silence grew heavier, and I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't hope or peace. It was resolve. I was done being lied to. Ms. Chen turned back to me. "We'll start a fraud dispute. I'll freeze your credit. But they'll try to make you look unstable. Don't react. Document everything." The air outside smelled like wet pavement, fresh yet heavy. I stood by my car for a moment, breathing deeply. Something had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel powerless. That night, Ryan came home with flowers, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom wants you to apologize before her birthday," he said, voice too smooth. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth was clear now. Elaine's house was too quiet, the kind of silence where every breath felt too loud. The air smelled like fresh flowers and polished wood, a sterile calm that felt nothing like home. I sat across from her, fingers stiff around the teacup she'd handed me, the porcelain cool against my palms. "You've been creating stress," she began, her voice sweet but cold. "Ryan needs peace. You will stop going to banks." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've been asking too many questions, and you're making things harder for Ryan. He needs calm. You're not helping anyone by digging into things." The words stung, but I swallowed the burn. Not helping anyone. Was that how she saw it? As if everything I'd uncovered was just a nuisance to them? "Why is your foundation's office on my loan?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. Elaine didn't even flinch. She sighed like I was being difficult, then leaned back in her chair, folding her hands neatly. "Sometimes paperwork needs help," she said smoothly. "Families help families." Her answer was too clean, too rehearsed. She wasn't even pretending it was a mistake anymore. The truth was right there, and it wasn't hidden, just buried under layers of her control. But she didn't stop there. "If you keep acting up," she said, her tone suddenly colder, "I'll make sure Ryan's whole family knows you're unstable. No one will believe you." The words hit harder than I expected, the weight of them sinking deep. I was trapped in her narrative now, the one where I was the problem, the one where I would never be seen as the victim. Before I could respond, Brooke walked in, her smirk already in place. "She's doing this again?" she asked, loud enough for the whole room to hear. God, she's exhausting. I didn't stay another second. I stood, my hands numb, and left without a word. Outside, the air smelled like fresh mulch, hiding rot beneath the surface. I got in my car, trying to calm my shaking hands, but then something caught my eye, an unmarked envelope under my wiper. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. Inside was a photocopy of a check, made out to Ryan from Elaine's foundation. Today I understand that the truth had been right in front of me all along. Omar met me in a small office with gray carpet and fluorescent lighting that made everything feel brutally honest. No soft lamps, no cozy decor, just a metal desk, a stack of files, and that faint smell of burnt coffee that clung to the air like it had given up trying to leave. I sat across from him and slid the photocopy out of my purse. The paper was thin and slightly curled from being handled too many times, like evidence that didn't want to be touched. He studied the check without rushing, eyes moving in steady lines. "This is from Elaine's foundation," he said, more statement than question. Then he looked up. "To Ryan." My throat tightened. "It was under my windshield wiper," I admitted, and even saying it out loud made me feel watched. Omar nodded once, like he'd seen uglier stories start in smaller ways. "Okay," he said. "Here's what I need. Bank statements, foundation filings, any tax paperwork you can access. We build a timeline. Timelines don't argue." My stomach twisted because I didn't have what he was asking for. Ryan had locked me out of the accounts. Password changed, statements missing. Every time I reached for clarity, someone moved the goalposts and told me I was spiraling. "I don't have full access," I said quietly. The words tasted like humiliation. "Then we use what's public," Omar replied, already turning his screen toward himself. "Nonprofits file. Vendors leave trails. People get careless." That afternoon, I went home and opened my laptop like I was doing homework for a life I didn't recognize. I requested public records for Elaine's foundation, annual filings, vendor lists, anything searchable. Clicking through government websites felt surreal, like I was investigating strangers. But these weren't strangers. This was Sunday dinners and holiday cards, and Elaine's hand on my cheek like a blessing. The screen glowed against my face while the house stayed too quiet. Each PDF loaded slowly, line by line, the numbers cold and indifferent. I kept expecting my brain to reject it, to say, "This is too much, this can't be your family." But my hands kept moving. That evening, Jenna came over. She didn't interrupt while I explained. Ryan's control, Elaine's threats, the loan, the check. She just listened, jaw tight, eyes steady on mine like she was anchoring me to reality. When I finally ran out of words, Jenna said, "Elaine's birthday party venue uses a central AV system." She paused, letting it land. "If something plays on those screens, it's because someone cued it." My skin prickled. Not because I had a plan yet, because the world suddenly felt more mechanical, less mystical. People did things. People pressed buttons. Lies required effort. Later that night, Ryan accidentally left a folder on the counter. Too neat, too staged, like he wanted me to find it. Inside were printouts and receipts labeled like a case file. Proof I'd been overspending. It was insulting how confident he was that I'd crumble. I flipped through until one real line punched through the noise. Foundation expense, Av Consult, party package. And beneath it, the name of Jenna's venue. My breath caught. My fingers went numb around the paper. The next morning, Omar called. His voice was calm, but it carried a kind of finality. "This isn't just a loan," he said. "It's a pattern. And your signature shows up where it shouldn't." Elaine's house glowed with warm lights and staged joy, the kind you see in real estate listings. Candles flickered on every surface, and laughter bounced off glassware like it had rehearsed. I stood near the kitchen doorway, smiling too much, holding a tray a caterer had handed me because Elaine had pointed at me instead of asking. People took appetizers without meeting my eyes. I felt like unpaid help in a room full of judges. Elaine floated to the center of the living room, pale blue dress, perfect hair, perfect posture. Church friends clustered around her. Foundation donors nodded like disciples. Neighbors whispered that she was a saint. Ryan stood beside her, polished and charming, as if he weren't the same man who'd locked me out of my own accounts. Elaine tapped her glass. The clink sliced through the chatter. "Thank you all for coming," she said, voice honeyed. "Tonight is about integrity, about family values, about doing the right thing even when it's hard. Heads bobbed, smiles widened, my stomach tightened. Ryan leaned close, still smiling at the crowd, and whispered without looking at me, "Behave. Don't ruin tonight." The words squeezed my throat. I swallowed the urge to speak, to shake, to run. Then the TV turned on by itself, a sharp click, a sudden blue glow. The music faltered. Conversation stalled mid-sentence as everyone turned toward the screen, confused. Elaine's smile froze. A video filled the TV. Elaine in her foundation office, harsh fluorescent light, her voice crisp and irritated. "Put it in her name," she said. "She'll panic and fold. She always does." Ryan's voice answered from off camera. "What if she goes to the bank?" Elaine's reply came like a knife. "Who will they believe?" Someone's laugh died in their mouth. A guest froze with a drink, half raised. Elaine's face tightened, skin pulled too fast. Ryan stepped forward, palms out, stammering, This is fake." I didn't shout. I didn't move. The screen shifted to a document beside the paused video. Ms. Chen's letterhead, a fraud case number, a note about the notary mismatch, and the foundation expense trail. Proof stacked like armor. Elaine's proudest donor lowered his glass, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Explain it." The room held its breath, waiting for her charm to save her, and it didn't anymore. Elaine turned toward me, and the look she gave promised war. The party didn't end with music like I thought it would. It ended with whispers. Phones were lifted discreetly, faces lit in the glow of screens, as guests trickled toward the exits in clusters, like they were trying to escape smoke. The laughter that had once bounced off the walls had died down to awkward murmurs. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, heavy and hot like I was the last piece of a broken puzzle no one wanted to look at anymore. Elaine found me in the hallway, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She was too calm, too controlled. The sweet scent of her expensive perfume, something floral and too strong, clung to the air around her. But it suddenly turned sour. She stopped in front of me, blocking the hallway with a smile that was more like a threat. "You ungrateful little—" Her voice was low, but it had the sharp edge of someone used to controlling the room. "After everything I did for you." I flinched. The words landed like a slap, but I didn't speak. I couldn't. The image of her on that video, cold, calculating, and cruel, kept playing in my mind. Ryan appeared beside her, slipping in like he had every right to be there. His hand reached for my wrist, his fingers tightening around it with a forced smile. His voice was too smooth, too practiced, like he was still trying to sell the illusion. "Let's talk privately," he said, his voice sickeningly polite, but his eyes burned with a quiet rage. I yanked my wrist away. "No, I'm done." My voice was steadier than I felt, but I couldn't look at him, not with the weight of the truth hanging between us. Tom, Elaine's silent partner, the one who had always disappeared when things got ugly, finally spoke up, but not for me. He turned to Elaine, his voice softer than it should have been. "Elaine, calm down," he said, like my life being stolen was just a mood problem. He didn't look at me. Not once. Brooke, her voice cutting through the tension, sneered from the doorway. "You set Elaine up, didn't you?" Her words landed like poison, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse from her. "God, you're exhausting," she added, as if I was the one dragging the drama. I was about to say something, anything, but someone in the room, someone whose name I didn't even know, asked a question that made everything stop. "How did the video happen?" Jenna, who had been standing near the AV cabinet, her arms crossed, raised her head slightly. She didn't flinch at the question. She didn't flinch at anything. "The file was uploaded from Elaine's foundation laptop," she said, her voice calm, factual. For half a second, Elaine's face flashed panic, the first honest emotion I'd seen from her in ages. Her eyes darted around the room like she could feel her control slipping through her fingers. Then she snapped, the false sweetness creeping back into her voice like a mask. "Everyone out," she ordered, louder now, her tone sharp enough to cut. People hesitated for just a second. Then slowly, they started moving toward the door, their heels clicking and their whispers filling the empty spaces they left behind. I stayed where I was. I didn't move. I wouldn't let them make me leave. As I walked to my car later, the weight of everything crushed me, but there was a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't relief. It wasn't peace. It was resolve. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, heart pounding. Foundation Board emergency meeting. Tonight. The message was from the foundation board. They were already moving, already planning, and I could feel the ground shifting under me. Before I could even process that, another buzz. A message from Ryan. If you keep going, you'll regret it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth was out there now, and it couldn't be silenced anymore. The foundation board meeting was held in a church hall that smelled like coffee urns and old hymn books. Folding chairs scraped the floor as people shifted, whispering in careful voices like they were afraid to wake something. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright for a room built for comfort. I sat near the back, hands clasped tight in my lap, trying to keep my fingers from shaking. Elaine walked in smiling like nothing had happened. Perfect hair, perfect posture. She moved through the room as if she owned it, greeting board members with that warm, saintly voice she used for donors and Sunday mornings. A board member cleared his throat. Elaine, we need clarity on the financial discrepancies raised last night. Elaine laughed softly, like the question was adorable. Oh, honestly, she said, waving a hand, this is a misunderstanding fueled by a jealous girl. Jealous girl. I felt the word crawl under my skin. I stared at the scuffed floor so I wouldn't react, because reacting was exactly what she wanted. Proof that I was unstable. Ryan spoke up too fast, like he'd rehearsed it in the car. She's emotional, he said smoothly. She's been stressed. She's confused and making accusations. The room didn't respond the way he expected. A few eyes shifted away from him, and not in sympathy, more like discomfort. Like they were suddenly hearing the manipulation in his tone. It was subtle, but I felt it. His reasonable husband mask wasn't landing right anymore. Packets were passed down the rows, printed pages, stapled, crisp. Omar's preliminary numbers. When one landed in my hands, the paper felt heavier than it should have. I scanned the page and my stomach turned. Unusual transfers, overlapping vendors, checks written to Ryan for consulting, notarizations tied to Elaine's office systems, dates lined up, amounts repeated. It wasn't chaos, it was a pattern. Elaine's smile tightened as she read. Her jaw flexed once. The board chair asked another question, calm and direct, and Elaine snapped before she could stop herself. This is ridiculous, Elaine said sharply. You're letting gossip. She caught herself mid-sentence, smoothing her tone too late. I mean, everyone's stressed. Let's be rational. But the room had already felt the truth. Once people hear the edge beneath the sweetness, they don't forget it. A woman near the front spoke, voice steady. Did you use donor funds to cover a personal loan in your daughter-in-law's name? Elaine's mouth opened. She tried to smile, tried to form something clean. Nothing came out that didn't sound guilty. The board chair folded her hands. Elaine, she said quietly, we're suspending you pending review. For a second, the hall was silent except for the coffee urn clicking as it reheated. Then Elaine's eyes found mine, cold, sharp, promising payback without saying a word. Ms. Chen filed the fraud affidavit and the divorce petition in the same week, like she was pulling two teeth that had been rotting in my mouth for years. The courthouse smelled like varnished wood and stale air conditioning, the kind of recycled cold that never quite felt clean. My shoes clicked against the polished floor, and every sound seemed too loud. Papers shuffling, a distant door closing, someone clearing their throat like they were trying to swallow nerves. Ms. Chen walked beside me with a slim folder tucked under her arm, calm as a surgeon. I kept waiting for my hands to start shaking, for my voice to crack, for someone to point at me and say, "See? She's unstable." But the longer I stood in that hard, official building, the more I realized the law didn't care how small I'd been trained to feel. It cared about documents, dates, signatures, proof. Ryan was already there when we entered the hearing room. He wore a crisp suit, hair neatly combed, jaw set in that confident way he used in public. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was the calm, wronged husband forced to deal with a hysterical wife. But I knew him. His knee bounced under the table, a quick, constant tremor that betrayed everything his face tried to hide. His confidence had cracks now, and I could see them in the tightness around his mouth, the way his eyes kept flicking toward Miss Chen's folder like it was a weapon. He didn't look at me the way a man looks at his wife. He looked at me the way someone looks at a problem they can't charm away anymore. His lawyer spoke first, voice smooth and rehearsed. "Your Honor, my client's wife has been under considerable stress," he began, gesturing toward me like I was a case study. "There's confusion here. In marriage, spouses often have implied consent to handle finances. This is being mischaracterized." Confusion. Implied consent. It was the same language they'd used in private, just dressed up in legal terms, like a suit over a bruise. I felt heat rise in my throat, the old instinct to explain, to soften, to make myself palatable. I caught myself clenching my jaw so hard my teeth ached. Ms. Chen didn't blink. She stood, opened her folder, and spoke with the kind of calm that made the room feel sharper. "Consent isn't transferable to crime," she said. That was it. One sentence. Clean and final. No apology. No emotion to twist. The lawyer's expression flickered. Just a moment, like he hadn't expected someone to cut through the performance. Then Elaine tried to insert herself. She stood, smoothing the front of her coat, face arranged into concern like makeup. "Your Honor," she said sweetly, "I'm only here as a concerned parent. Ryan is under—" The judge looked at her. Just looked. A long, flat stare that made the room go quiet in a way that felt physical. Elaine's words faltered. Her shoulders dipped slightly. For the first time in my presence, she shrank, not because she felt remorse, but because she wasn't the highest authority in the room anymore. "Ma'am," the judge said, cool and firm, "this does not involve you." Elaine sat down slowly, lips pressed tight, and I felt something shift inside me. Not joy, not relief, something steadier. After the hearing, the system moved fast in ways Elaine's reputation couldn't stop. The bank froze the HELOC. Credit bureaus flagged identity theft. Notifications started hitting my phone like a chain reaction. Clinical emails, case numbers, formal language. The paper trail began moving like a machine that didn't care who Elaine was at church. Outside, the air was cold and smelled like damp pavement. Ryan followed me down the courthouse steps, close enough that I could feel his breath near my ear. "You think you're strong?" he whispered, smiling for anyone watching. His fingers brushed my elbow like a lover's touch, but it wasn't tenderness. It was possession. "You're nothing without us." I tasted metal because I was biting my tongue so hard it felt like I might bleed. I kept walking anyway, letting Miss Chen guide me toward the car like she'd done this 100 times. That night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unknown number. I listened in the dark, my bedroom lit only by the glow of the screen. Elaine's voice slid through the speaker, soft, controlled, almost kind. "We can make this disappear," she said. A pause, just long enough to feel like a hand closing around my throat. "If you behave." Elaine's perfect world didn't collapse with screaming or broken glass. It collapsed the way real worlds do. Quietly, mechanically, through letters in white envelopes and emails with formal subject lines. The kind of messages you can't flirt away or pray away. The kind that don't care how many times you've hosted a fundraiser or how many people call you a saint. It started with silence. One afternoon, I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Banks, offices, unfamiliar area codes. Then an email from the foundation's bank popped up in my forwarded chain through Ms. Chen. Account review notice. The language was stiff and clinical. Suspicious activity. Temporary holds. Additional documentation required. No emotion, no drama, just a door closing. A day later, donors began to talk. Not loud at first, just enough that you could feel it in the town's air, like pressure before a storm. A woman I'd seen at Elaine's parties posted online about requesting clarity on where her donation went. Another demanded a refund outright. When people who used to clap for Elaine started asking questions in public, it was like watching a chandelier sway after the ceiling had already cracked. The church distanced itself next, not with a sermon, with a decision. I heard about it from a friend who volunteered there, her voice careful, almost guilty. They took Elaine's name down, she said, from the event banner. I pictured it immediately. That long vinyl banner Elaine had paid extra for, her name printed in elegant script beside the words, Community Giving Night. I imagined someone climbing a ladder, peeling the tape back, the fabric snapping in the air. No confrontation, no apology, just erasure. Elaine was the kind of woman who lived on visibility. Taking her name down wasn't just embarrassing, it was starvation. The foundation board hired an outside auditor, not another friendly member from church who owed Elaine favors, a real firm, real professionals, people who didn't care about her casserole recipes or her holiday cards. Omar's deeper review followed, and this time it wasn't just one bad document or one loan, it was a map. He explained it to me in timelines and proof, his voice calm as if he were discussing weather. Transfers that lined up with Ryan's accounts, vendor payments that looped back into consulting checks, notarizations tied to Elaine's office systems, forged authorization chains, emails, forms, approvals, built to look legitimate until you stared long enough to see the pattern was too perfect. Elaine tried to rally her old allies like she always did. Phone calls, lunch invitations, little check-ins that used to work like gravity, but people were suddenly unavailable. I saw it happen in tiny humiliations. A woman at the grocery store turned her cart down a different aisle when she spotted Elaine. A board member walked past her at church with a phone pressed to his ear, eyes fixed forward. Conversations ended when she approached. Smiles stiffened, then disappeared. The social ice of shame formed around her, and it didn't matter how polished she was. She couldn't break through it. Ryan's life started falling apart too, and unlike Elaine, he didn't have decades of community worship to cushion the fall. His employer received subpoenaed records, conflict of interest payments routed through the foundation, his name popping up where it shouldn't. He came home one evening with his tie loosened and his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "They're ruining me," he snapped, pacing the living room like an animal trapped in a smaller and smaller cage. "Do you understand what you did?" He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say, "How could Mom do this?" He said, "You," like I had forged my own signature, like I had pressed his mother's notary stamp onto my life. His charm turned jagged. The smooth, reasonable husband voice cracked into something desperate and ugly. When he looked at me, he didn't see a person. He saw the consequences. Then Elaine reached for the only tool she had left, guilt wrapped in money. She asked to meet privately, like she was doing me a favor. When she spoke, her voice went soft, almost maternal, the same tone she used in front of donors when she wanted to seem compassionate. "Let's keep this in the family," she said, sliding an envelope across the table like it was a peace offering. "We can settle this quietly. You don't want to destroy Ryan's future. You don't want to destroy mine." I didn't touch the envelope. I didn't even glance down at it. I looked at her face. The face that had smiled while saying I'd panic and fold, and felt how calm my anger had become. "You lost the right to family when you used my name," I said quietly. Her eyes flashed, a crack of rage under the softness. For a second, I thought she might lunge across the table. Instead, she tightened her lips, as if swallowing poison. That night, Miss Chen called me. Her voice was steady, efficient, never dramatic. "The prosecutor wants to speak to you," she said. "They're considering charges." I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, the room around me suddenly too still, like even the air was listening. and I realized something that made my chest feel both heavy and clean at the same time. Elaine couldn't charm her way out of law. Elaine demanded to meet at her house, but when I arrived, it was different. The same pristine kitchen I'd once stood in, smiling at her like we were family, now felt hollow. Like a stage after the audience had left, everything still set in place but suddenly empty. The glossy countertops and spotless floors weren't comforting anymore. They were cold, detached. They reminded me of everything she'd hidden behind that picture-perfect smile. Elaine didn't waste time with pleasantries. She wanted to fix this, her mess, her damage, and I was the obstacle. She started with tears, those fake little droplets she knew how to turn on with the flick of a switch, her lip trembling as she leaned against the island. "I've tried, you know," she whispered, her voice cracked with the kind of dramatics I knew were meant to break me. "I've done everything for you, for Ryan. You're destroying his future, and you're doing it because you're angry." I almost laughed, but I couldn't find the humor. I'd seen it before. Her emotional manipulation, the way she could twist anyone's world around with just a look. But now, I wasn't buying it. I wasn't going to feel guilty for surviving her. She shifted tactics quickly. The tears faded, replaced with rage. Her voice rose sharper, more dangerous. "You're ruining everything, everything I built. I've worked my whole life for this perfect life. And you think you can just tear it all down?" It was like watching someone slip between two personalities, depending on what she thought would stick. First the victim, then the furious, controlling matriarch. I kept my face still, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Then, just as quickly, she softened again, her voice lowering to that syrupy tone she always reserved for heart-to-heart talks. "You're not just hurting me, you're hurting Ryan. You're destroying his future." She said it like my ruined credit, my financial chaos, was a mere afterthought in her long-winded tale of sacrifice. It wasn't about me, not really. It was always about her. I didn't react. I didn't have to. She wasn't my problem anymore. The door opened with a soft creak and Ryan walked in, uninvited, his face a mix of guilt and anger. I could feel the shift in the room the second his eyes landed on me. Guilt for everything he had left unsaid, and anger because his perfect little world was crumbling. He opened his mouth, but it wasn't the pleading I expected. It was an accusation. "You set us up, didn't you?" he said, his voice cracking but hard. His fists clenched, and I could see his jaw working, like he was trying to keep himself from shouting. "You knew what would happen. You knew how to push Mom into a corner." I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. Then, just as quickly, the venom shifted. His eyes softened. His voice turned pleading. "Please, just stop. Stop this. Stop the bleeding. I can't lose everything. Not everything." I looked at him. I really looked at him. The man who had gaslit me for so long, the man who had stood by while his mother controlled everything, while they used my name to secure their own wealth and power. Now he was scared. Now he was the one who couldn't handle the consequences. I didn't feel pity. I just felt the weight of everything I had been carrying. The lies, the manipulation, the doubt. It was all falling away. I placed the stack of documents on the table between us. Timeline, bank letters, audit summary, and watched as their eyes tracked the papers, the weight of the truth heavy on the table. Elaine's eyes darted from page to page, the color draining from her face. Ryan's gaze flickered nervously, but he didn't speak. Finally, Elaine's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're doing this to punish me," she said, like she truly believed it. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her and answered, "No, I'm doing this to stop you." For the first time, I saw the cracks in her. I stood to leave, but before I could turn, her voice cracked into something ugly. "Who do you think you are?" she spat, the words sharp and desperate, a raw panic beneath them. I didn't answer. I just walked out, the finality of it settling into my bones. I wasn't just leaving her house. I was leaving everything she'd ever tried to make me believe. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen lit up with an email notification. Divorce temporary orders granted. I stared at the words for a moment, the reality settling over me. I had protection now, real protection. I was walking away from her world and stepping into mine. Today, I know that sometimes the hardest part isn't exposing the truth. It's letting go of what you thought you needed to survive. Months later, I sat in my new apartment, the kind of place that smelled like clean laundry and fresh paint, a sharp contrast to the stale, oppressive air of Elaine's house. It wasn't big, but it felt expansive in ways I hadn't expected. The silence here wasn't punishment, it was safety. The kind of peace that wasn't earned through submission or fear, but through simply existing in a space that was mine. Every inch of it was untouched by their shadows, by their control. The days passed, and slowly I watched my credit heal. It didn't happen overnight, but I could see the numbers shifting, line by line, month after month. I learned the satisfaction of paying my own bills without anyone looking over my shoulder. No more pretending I didn't know where the money went. No more pretending I wasn't being watched. The power of knowing no one could weaponize my name again was deeper than I ever expected. But then Ryan started sending me emails. At first, it was just a few subject lines that read, "I miss you," and "Mom pressured me." But they felt hollow, like they'd been rehearsed in front of a mirror, written with the same smooth words he used to manipulate me before. There was no real apology in them, no genuine remorse, just excuses dressed up as regret. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth had already been said, and it didn't need to be said again. Elaine's public image, however, was a different story. Her perfect world had never been as perfect as it seemed. The board removal? It became community gossip. People whispered behind closed doors, and her name, once a symbol of charity and grace, became a cautionary tale. Donors who had once praised her at gala dinners vanished. Invitations stopped. Events she used to lead didn't even bother to mention her. Her smile, once so sure of itself, was a story people warned each other about. I could hear it in the way people spoke of her now, the pity and the disbelief that had replaced admiration. But I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't feel triumph. Instead, I simply stopped carrying her fear in my body. I stopped bracing for footsteps in hallways that would never come. I stopped apologizing for asking questions, for daring to look deeper, for not letting her lie to me and to everyone else any longer. I realized, looking back, that the real revenge wasn't about watching her crumble. It wasn't about feeling superior or seeing her suffer. It was about the quiet, calm satisfaction that comes with rebuilding yourself, piece by piece, in peace. Elaine had once made me feel like nothing, like a mere tool in her perfect world. But here, in this small apartment, I was something else entirely. Someone who had survived, someone who had found their way out. Today I know that dignity isn't passive. It's disciplined. It's not about fighting back with anger or retaliation. It's about standing firm in your truth, no matter how loud the world around you gets. It's about taking control of your own narrative and letting the truth speak for itself, without needing to prove anything to anyone. And sometimes when a TV turns on unexpectedly in someone else's perfect house, I don't flinch anymore. I don't brace for the chaos. I don't hold my breath waiting for my world to shatter. I remember the moment my own life turned on, the moment I heard the truth, and I realized I survived it. And that's what matters.